Whoa! Whoa! Whoa!
There are targets in a war that change the rules when they are hit. DEMONA is one of them. Footage circulating online captured the moment a missile struck the ground in the southern Israeli town, with a second angle suggesting a possible interception attempt seconds before impact. Emergency teams were deployed to multiple locations. Megan David Adam said at least 20 people were injured, including a 10-year-old boy and a 40-year-old woman. Additional patients were treated for minor injuries and trauma. The strike drew immediate attention not because of the casualty count, which by the standards of this war is not the highest in a single incident, but because of what sits on the edge of that town. The Shimon Peres Negev Nuclear Research Center, the facility that is widely believed to be the core of Israel's undeclared nuclear program. A missile just hit DEMONA, the city tied in every serious discussion to Israel's nuclear center. The nuclear dimension of this war is no longer implied, it is visible. DEMONA's nuclear facility has never been officially acknowledged as a weapons site by Israel, but it is widely understood to house a plutonium production reactor and related infrastructure that forms the backbone of Israel's nuclear deterrent. The facility sits in the Negev desert, surrounded by restricted airspace and layers of security that make it one of the most defended installations in the country. Striking near DEMONA is not the same as striking near Haifa or Tel Aviv. It is a strike in the shadow of a nuclear facility. What matters is not a distance this script cannot verify, but the fact that a missile hit the city most closely associated with Israel's nuclear center. Israel has never confirmed or denied possessing nuclear weapons, but the facility at DEMONA is the reason every intelligence agency in the world assumes it does. The human cost is specific. A 10-year-old boy, a 40-year-old woman, at least 20 people treated at the scene or transported to hospitals. The injuries ranged from shrapnel wounds to trauma symptoms. DEMONA is a smaller desert city than Tel Aviv, which makes even one missile impact feel immediate across the whole community. When a missile hits a town that size, the entire population feels it. Every family knows someone who was near the impact. The boy who was injured is not a statistic. He is someone's son in a town that exists because a nuclear facility was built next to it decades ago. The facility brought the town into existence, and now the facility has brought the war to its doorstep. The DEMONA strike arrived against a backdrop of nuclear sites being hit on both sides. Iran's Tasnim news agency reported that the Natanz uranium enrichment facility was targeted again in a US-Israeli airstrike. Iranian authorities condemned the strike as criminal and accused the United States and Israel of violating international law and commitments surrounding nuclear safety. Iran's Atomic Energy Organization said no leakage of radioactive material was detected at the complex and that there was no immediate danger to nearby residents. Natanz is Iran's primary enrichment site, located about 220 kilometers southeast of Tehran. It was struck in the early days of the war, with satellite imagery showing significant damage to several buildings. The UN nuclear watchdog reported no radiological consequences from that earlier strike. But each time Natanz is hit, the question of whether the next strike breaches containment becomes harder to dismiss. Then came the image that alarmed nuclear authorities worldwide. Analysis by the Institute for Science and International Security, using Airbus imagery, identified an impact site about 350 meters from the Bushehr nuclear power plant reactor. An impact crater is clearly visible. The Institute for Science and International Security reported the strike occurred on a Tuesday evening. Iran informed the IAEA about the incident. Tehran said the projectile destroyed a structure near the reactor, but that the reactor itself was undamaged and no injuries were reported. 350 meters. That is the distance between a crater and a nuclear disaster. The Bushehr plant is an operational power reactor. A direct hit on an operating reactor could trigger a severe regional radiological emergency. The strike missed, but the margin was measured in a distance most people can walk in 4 minutes. The analysis of the Bushehr impact raised an unexpected question. The debris pattern, according to the Institute for Science and International Security, pointed north, away from the Persian Gulf. The debris pattern led the Institute for Science and International Security to say the projectile may have approached from the north, but responsibility remains unconfirmed. Satellite imagery from a week before the incident showed an unidentified object approximately 5 meters long sitting in an open field at the same location. The nature of that object remains unclear. Responsibility for the Bushehr impact has not been officially claimed or assigned, but But the proximity to a live reactor and the ambiguity of the origin have made this one of the most scrutinized incidents of the entire war. IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi issued a warning that was as close to an ultimatum as a UN nuclear official can deliver. He said any attack at or near nuclear power plants violates critical safety principles and should never take place under any circumstances. He urged all sides to exercise maximum restraint, called for transparency and communication, and pushed for strict avoidance of nuclear targets. There have also been growing calls for coordination with Russia to prevent further escalation around nuclear sites. Grossi's language was not diplomatic boilerplate. It was a direct statement that the war has reached a threshold that the international nuclear safety framework was not designed to absorb. The system that prevents nuclear accidents depends on the assumption that no one bombs reactors. That assumption is now being tested in real time. 2 nuclear facilities, 2 countries, both hit or nearly hit in the same conflict. DEMONA, where a missile wounded dozens in the city linked to Israel's nuclear center, and Bushehr, where a crater sits about 350 meters from an operating reactor. The symmetry is hard to miss, even if this script cannot prove intent. Iran has been striking deeper into Israeli territory with every wave. Israel and the United States have been striking Iranian nuclear infrastructure since the opening night. The escalation ladder that both sides have been climbing for 3 weeks just reached the rung where the word nuclear stops being a metaphor for severity and starts being a literal description of what is at risk. What makes this moment different from every previous escalation is the irreversibility. A destroyed airfield can be rebuilt. A sunken ship can be replaced. A damaged radar station can be repaired. A breached nuclear reactor cannot be undone. The contamination lasts decades. The exclusion zone lasts generations. And the decision to strike near one, whether intentional or accidental, carries consequences that outlast the war itself by centuries. Natanz has now been struck at least twice. The first strike, in the opening phase, caused visible damage to buildings on the complex. The IAEA reported no radiological release. The second strike, reported by Tasnim, suggests that the enrichment facility remains on the target list despite international warnings. Iran has condemned each strike as a violation of nuclear safety norms. But the strikes continue, and each one raises the probability that a future impact breaches a containment structure, releases enriched material, or triggers a chain of events that no military planner intended. The margin for error at a nuclear site is not the same as at an airfield. At an airfield, a near miss is a miss. At a nuclear facility, a near miss is a crisis that was avoided by luck, not by design. The war has created a new category of target that did not exist in this form before: nuclear facilities under active bombardment. DEMONA is not officially a weapons site. Bushehr is a civilian power plant. Natanz is an enrichment facility that Iran says is for peaceful purposes. None of them were supposed to be on anyone's target list during an armed conflict. Natanz has been struck. Bushehr has suffered a near miss on its premises. And DEMONA has shown how close this war has moved to Israel's nuclear center. The norms that were supposed to protect nuclear sites, the IAEA framework, the Geneva adjacent expectations of restraint, are being eroded not by a single dramatic breach, but by a pattern of near misses that move the threshold closer to disaster with each wave. A 10-year-old boy injured in DEMONA, a crater 350 meters from a reactor in Bushehr, a 5-meter object on satellite imagery that no one has explained, an enrichment facility struck twice, an IAEA chief issuing warnings that sound more like pleas, and a war that has now reached the point where the distance between a missile impact and a nuclear catastrophe is measured in the length of a football field. The conventional war is 3 weeks old. The nuclear dimension of this war, the one no one wanted to name, is now visible on satellite imagery. It is visible in the debris pattern at Bushehr. It is visible in the shrapnel wounds of a child in DEMONA. And it is visible in the silence of every government that knows what happens if the next missile lands 350 meters closer. The war started with airfields. It moved to cities. It reached energy infrastructure. It hit holy sites. And now it has arrived at the perimeter of nuclear facilities on both sides. Each escalation seemed impossible until it happened. The next one, the one that crosses from near miss to direct hit on a reactor, is the one that the entire international nuclear safety framework was built to prevent. That framework is now being tested by missiles, not by diplomats. And the missiles do not read IAEA guidelines.